So let's talk about some of the most common allergens. Let's start with one I have a personal vendetta against, and that's gluten. Now, gluten is a protein, and this protein is found in wheat, barley, and rye. It's found in those grains. Now, wheat's basically used in everything in this culture. Because it's so cheap, it's used as what's called a flowing agent. In other words, it's put on conveyor belts to keep things dusty and smooth and keep them from sticking together. So this gluten saturates is the only way that I know how to explain it. It saturates our culture. Now people will say, oh, didn't ancient people, didn't they eat wheat? Why would we have this sudden new allergy to gluten? But ancient peoples ate a grain called speltum triticale, which is 1% gluten. And they didn't eat very much of it. We, in this culture, eat modern wheat that's been genetically engineered, and it has 12% gluten. And we eat a ton of it, and it's in everything. So really, where an ancient person might have ate the equivalent of a slice of bread in gluten, we eat the equivalent of 100 slices of bread with the higher concentration of gluten and the more exposure in our diet. So just like you could drink a glass of water and feel good, but if you have to drink 100 glasses of water, you're not going to feel too good. That's the same concept of why gluten is so damaging to our health in this culture. Gluten allergens, when they come up, they are usually associated with chronic inflammatory states. So if you have a chronic inflammatory state, which is basically an itis, an arthritis, a colitis, all those itises are very often we'll see the patient will come up with a high IgG hidden food response to gluten. Now, some people will confuse these two concepts of what they know as celiac disease and also having a gluten allergy, hidden food gluten allergy. What I've found in practice is that a particular patient may think they have a gluten problem, go for a diagnosis of celiac disease, and it comes back negative. Then that patient comes to my office, we test them for their IgG hidden food allergens, and they will test sensitive to gluten. They'll give up the gluten and their symptoms will go away. So what does that mean? It means basically this diagnosis of celiac, which is basically you have to have a positive intestinal biopsy and a positive anti-gliadin antibody in your blood. Gliadin is one of the components of the protein gluten. It's a piece of gluten. You could not be responsive to them, but gluten allergy can still be creating your problem and driving inflammation in your body. So that's the important thing to know about gluten. Just because you or a family member has been cleared of celiac, in other words, they said you don't have celiac, that's only a small piece of the ways your body can be sensitive to gluten. The more comprehensive, full picture is to do the IgG hidden food allergen panel. Okay, why is gluten such a problem? I know a lot of questions came through on the internet about gluten. There's 3 molecules in nature that we're exposed to that share a same size and shape. It's a 1 nanometer spirochete, which is a little slinky. Syphilis, Lyme's disease, and gluten. So you better believe if you're sensitive to gluten and your body sees that molecule when you eat it, your body's going to pay attention. It's not going to be a 1 alarm fire, it's going to be a 5 alarm fire. And this is why gluten is so damaging to your health. Not only that, okay, we are saturated with gluten in this culture. Okay, the equivalent amounts of gluten, that's mom. The equivalent amounts of gluten, if you had a glass of water from this tub, okay, or you drank the whole thing. Ancient people ate speltum triticale, which has 1% gluten. Modern wheat has 12% gluten. Okay, and they only ate it occasionally. We're exposed to it in every food. It's in everything. Okay, they inject gluten into chicken in restaurants to make it more plump and juicy. So you're eating gluten-free, having chicken at one of these chains, and you're not eating gluten-free. You're eating tons of gluten. Okay? So if you ask me, oh, what's this new trend? Why can't we have gluten? There are some grains that had gluten in ancient Rome. Drink a bathtub of water and then tell me how you feel. Because that's the equivalent amount that we're consuming in gluten. Okay. A lot of people get confused about celiac versus gluten. When we test you, we say you're sensitive to gluten or you're not sensitive. You have an allergy or you don't have an allergy. Now people will say, does that mean I have celiac disease? Celiac is a very specific diagnosis. Requires an intestinal biopsy and positive anti-gluten antibodies in the blood. Who cares if you have celiac? That's just one slice of the way to be sensitive to gluten. There's a lot of different ways. You can have chronic migraines. My sister had MS with no sensitivity to gluten through biopsy or blood draw. But when I did that test on her, she came back super high to gluten. So I hope that makes sense. Don't worry about celiac or not. You can either eat gluten or you can't.